I got the filmmakers, the road to everywhere. Um, we got Michael Shoob, Joe Mealey, an amazing film. If I don't, but I'm biased because I'm also in the film. So say hello,
Oh,
you
you were
guys.
great in it, by the way. I really love what you contributed to the film.
Oh,
You
thank
were
you.
you were terrific in both the films. I mean,
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. So that's what I wanted to talk about is that just to start off is like this is a continuation from the movie Driven, which was done 30 years. Or would you call it a sequel or
well, I kind of would call it a follow-up because it's not really, don't we, Driven was, excuse me, was conceptualized as an ensemble movie, kind of an Altman-esque multi-character movie, and where we kind of explored the lives of different cab drivers. And this one's concentrating more on one cab driver, and we turned that ensemble movie into a road movie. Kind of one of those 70s road movies. That's kind of the way we envision this.
mm. So I mean you kind of called it the coming of age for grown-ups, I think was the tag that you I don't know I don't know if you came up with that or Joe but
Joe can tell you where he got that.
Actually, my wife came up with that term when after she saw the first rough cut of it, said that's kind of what it is. Two guys who are a certain age who kind of grow up a little bit during the movie.
yeah, it's kind of genius actually. You could tell her I said that.
Right.
Because you guys worked together and you worked on Bush's Brain
Right.
and you're motivated collaborators. So what made you choose to do sort of a continuation of this movie as opposed to whatever else you might have been cooking in your brain?
Well, I would say that I had been after Bush's Brain. A funny thing happens, I think, in the movie business is I had spent my entire sort of adult life writing and trying to direct movies. And Joe had an idea to do this documentary, Bush's Brain. I had done some documentary before, but suddenly we made a famous documentary, and all anybody wanted to talk to me about were documentaries. So
Right.
I I had been hungry to do another dramatic film, and it had some false starts with movies that kind of got on the runway but didn't take off. Um, so Joe and I met at Arts Deli in the Valley, and we were getting together periodically. And
They're not a
look,
sponsor, by the way.
yes, well
It's
now they are. Now they are. Uh, uh, and we talked about wanting to do a movie, and maybe we could do something. What could we do, and could we do a follow-up of Driven? And then we kind of got uh, I think we both got excited about that idea, and it kind of went from there. It really took off. And I have to say that you know you work alone a lot as a writer, and Joe worked on the story with me, and his being there, and I think it created a momentum that I wouldn't have had by myself. His being involved and his know-how and visual background and background with me on story in the past. I think this was our seventh project we had worked on. So
Oh
um,
wow.
I think I don't know if I've counted that right, Joe, but I think we did three movies at the AFI. Then we did a short in Las Vegas. That's
Right.
four.
Yeah.
Bush's Brain driven in this. This is our
Right. Yeah.
seventh project together. So, and what he brings to it is just phenomenal in terms of just,
Appreciate that.
really uh, creating a collaborative environment where you become more creative. And I think that happened in the creation of the story. And I would go off and write maybe an act of the movie, show it to him. And what was great was that he would look at it really quickly. Rawle, I'm sure you know from generating your own projects, getting somebody to read something is hard enough. Getting them to read it promptly
Right,
is
right.
almost impossible. And I would
Right.
give him something at 3 o'clock, and it was read at 6 o'clock. So
Wow.
I would get instant feedback. You're on the right track. I think this is working, and it was so motivating for me just to keep going and developing the script. So I'd say that collaborative uh, propeller he created for the partnership was just tremendous.
And
Well,
it's
thank
probably chemistry too, because it's
Yeah,
like the right collaborations. Because sometimes
yeah.
we have collaborations and they're like, eh.
Well, I think after
well,
seven movies, we've got done something right, you know. So
yeah.
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 And Joe, you want to elaborate on that? Like what the part, like what made you read the script so quickly?
Well, actually, it was just a lot of fun. I liked the story. You know, and we had already had Michael had already written the characters, knew them in and out. So doing it again, we already understood that part, and then it was really about telling the story. I kind of view the difference. You know, the writer director's job, I think, is to follow their heart, and I think the producer's job, to some extent, is to represent the audience and see whether what's being written is going to be understood by the audience and whether it takes them on a road they want to go on. And I think that was kind of what the collaboration was about.
A road to everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because it- I was just curious about what made you guys well, let me just ask this, like what would you say was the difference between when you did Driven? Because it was 30 years before, so so obviously Michael still had those characters just locked into his brain. But did it make it easier to continue, or did you just feel like it was a completely different
I
movie?
would say unquestionably it was easier to continue. I mean, Driven was a real battle because it was my first feature. I
Mm,
had raised money. I had partners. The partners blew up. You know, I had numerous different projects. I went off to write Driven. I the earthquake happened, and I was
um,
displaced from where I was living and had to live in two or three other places. It was kind of it was sort of me against the world trying to make this happen. In this case, I think, and I also, when you're doing your first film, you wonder, can I do it? Can I do it well? You're fighting issues of your own confidence
right.
and how you want to perform as a director writer. This time I felt much more relaxed. I mean, certainly not absolutely, but much more confident in the fact that we knew the characters worked. And I felt like working with Joe, we had kind of streamlined a way of working. It was just much more, not that I mean, we had tremendous setbacks, but
Right, right.
including losing the lead actor, as you know, and which was a huge thing, and we had to put off shooting for, I think, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. So, but I think both of us, we were older, more mature, and I think it had more confidence that we knew how to do this time
Yeah,
around.
Oh wow. So Joe, I this may seem like a rudimentary question,
sure.
but I have to ask it because it's always asked through Hollywood. What exactly does the producer do? What exactly would you say?
Well, in this case, I would say in my case, I was the creative producer. Unlike many movies, we didn't have a
Wow.
long list of 20 producers where you ask, what do all these people do? I still don't know the answer to that question.
Right.
But like I said, I think I represent the audience in terms of creatively to help decide whether they're actually going to get it. And it is often financial. An indie film by nature has a limited budget. You can't spend on everything. And I think sometimes that's an advantage rather than a disadvantage. But you want to make sure you're not spending money on things that don't matter, but you also want to make sure you're spending money on things that actually do matter that will make the film better. And that's kind of an art in itself. But it's also figuring out how to get it done. And there's a lot of options you have, and you have to it's sort of the strategically, how do you make this movie in a certain amount of days in terms of locations? It's not all nuts and bolts, but creatively you have to decide, uh, do we take this movie on the road? Do we put it on a stage?
Right, right.
A combination, those sorts of things, and then figuring out how to get people to. It's easier nowadays to make a movie than we did Driven, but it's hard. It's harder than ever to get it into the public consciousness.
Right, right. It sounds a lot more laborious than like the kid stays in the picture. It doesn't sound like the
Right.
slick, cool
Yeah.
Robert Evans stuff,
Yeah.
especially indie filmmaking, right?
Indie filmmaking. I think it's a completely different experience than studio filmmaking. You bet. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of want to talk about you guys. I want to ask you guys both this question about because you make Michael, you make documentaries and you make narratives and indie films like Driven. What do you find more fun, or what do you think is like the difference
Well,
creatively and all that?
for me, I love documentaries. Um, and in this case, Bush's Brain was kind of Joe's idea originally. And I
Mm,
love politics and grew up in politics. So I made a documentary. We restored a documentary I made way back in the 70s and had a screening of it not long ago. And we had 50 people there and they said they really loved it. And at the time, I didn't really have any idea what I was doing. And it kind of worked, but
mm,
I love people, observing people. You're kind of a psychologist watching, in docs. The thing I love about writing and directing narrative is, and I think you would relate to this as an actor, is there's stuff that happens in the process that, like, Joe and I go into production. We have a script, we have actors. We don't know what's going to happen.
right,
Uh, Everything, like when you came to the set, I remember specifically, uh, and and I realized you got there, and I'm realizing, wait a minute, Rawle and I know each other really well. We haven't even talked about this much,
Oh, you're
and we
talking
were
about the
the
current
current
project.
movie. I mean,
Yeah.
here we were, and but and then you brought in an accent, and I thought, I don't know if the accent's working, and then I try
Right.
it without the accent. Suddenly, it felt like it came to life in the course of us just working together. And
Right, right, right.
what you see in the final film just feels seamless and works perfectly. It's full of subtext. Your amiability in the movie as Soup, and Whip's anxiety, everything that's unspoken is really
Right.
powerful. The casting director came up to me at the first screening and said, that scene just wiped me out emotionally. You know, he
Right,
said,
right.
I've
Wow.
been in so many of these things where people ask me, what are you doing?
Right,
And
right, right,
and
right.
students of mine who've gone on to great things, and I'm struggling. So
Right, right.
I just think that the idea of creating something beyond yourself with documentary, that happens to some degree. You find it in the editing often, but there's so many places where this unspoken thing happens. Like it happened in the scene with you. It happened. I'll give you an example. I wanted to mention this when Joe was talking about the role of a producer.
Gotcha.
We have a scene with the character of Jake, the Native American character, who is coming to see his daughter, and he goes to see her at her house. I had written it for the house or the back of the house. So we had the location, everything was set. Right before we were shooting, Joe said, out if you walk out about 75 yards, there's a sheep corral and a whole vista where there's cattle and uh
Oh, right.
and cow and he said, have a look and see. Suddenly we restaged the whole scene at the sheep corral. you know
Right.
it changed the whole movie. The movie became, I think that scene and that choice of Joe's gave the movie tremendous majesty in that scene. uh it said the background, the visuals. So it's sort of like these collaborators. You're in this orchestra, as a director, you're like a conductor, and suddenly somebody just soars. Like Joe comes up with this idea that changes the movie. I don't even think he thought that much of it at the time. He can speak to it, but it becomes greater than you are,
Right.
greater than you imagine in some ways.
Right,
That's
right.
what I.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons that happened was because during filming, my job was over. but to sit back and watch. And I could walk around and see this vista where Michael and has this tunnel vision of what's going on in front of him. That naturally, that's director's job. And so I could say, let's do this. One of the few beauties of an independent film without studio financing is we can make that change in 10 minutes rather than getting
Right,
the big steamship to turn after a couple miles, and it can happen.
right,
And that's kind of where you ask about narrative versus documentary.
right,
In certain ways, we film this documentary style.
right, right.
But and that allowed us to be able, okay, let's move over here, and it can happen without much trouble. Yeah.
It's so amazing too, because having seen the movie, I kind of have a cheat code here because I've seen the movie. So,
Yeah.
but for the audience or people who haven't seen it, it's like it just makes this was on a dime, instantaneous sort of decision you made or adjustment. But it looks like I was when I saw that because a lot of the movie was you're in the cab a lot, and when you see shots like that, it just opens it up so much. And so I was thinking you guys were geniuses. Meanwhile, it's accidental, kind of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
One favorite Hollywood story I've read is that on Witness, I think was it Ridley Scott directed with no Peter Weir, I forget which
Peter Weir.
director,
Peter Weir.
Peter
Yeah.
Weir.
Either way.
They were looking at how to end the movie, and he wasn't happy with what the ending looked like. And
Mm,
he and the DP kept saying, "Let's take a walk." And they walked around the farm that they were working on, and he looked at the grain silo and he said, "That's it, the grain." And there's that famous grain silo scene at the end of Witness, and
right,
I
right.
kind of felt like the sheep corral section was sort of like our grain silo. We took a
Right, right.
walk and we found something great, that kind of changed the scope of the movie and the feel of the movie.
I guess like in Jaws when they were saying the shark wasn't working,
Right.
it's actually seeing the shark, so they decided to use the music as a psychological kind of hint of
Well,
yeah.
apropos of that, I heard Spielberg talking about John Williams and how John Williams played that cue from Jaws for him the first time. Dum dum dum. And Steven Spielberg kind of looked at him and that's it. I've been waiting for months for
Right.
dum dum dum. And then they put it on the movie and they blew him away.
Right, right,
It's
right.
just, and this is what I mean about the sort of transcendent moments where you feel like you're soaring above above sort of your own sense of what you can do. So,
Yeah, I mean it's like the situation with myself in the scene and Road to Everywhere is I did feel a lot freer without the accent. I remember we'd kind of sort of talked on the phone because we didn't really we didn't really meet up, but it wasn't like a rehearsal or anything. But on the set right away is I felt this because it felt like a conti I felt like I immediately felt like soup again,
Right. Yeah.
you
and what
know.
was funny, Rawl, is when I finished the scene, I kind of felt bad because I felt like maybe I hadn't prepared enough for you, and I wasn't sure we had gotten it. And then we got into the editing room, and it worked beautifully. So it was one of these things where you don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't feel tremendous confidence at the end of. I remember looking at you, and you kind of said, "Well, how did we do?" And I said, "Great," but you looked at me kind of like, I'm not buying this.
Well, well, this is a separate thing, and I don't know how this may have to do with the director and I know Joe, you're a DP, so you might be able to chime in on this, but I when we were filming, I noticed that I saw the scene you were filming just before that, and it was like high energy and a lot of it was like one of the one of the arguments that they were having, and I something in the back of my mind said, I wonder if if he's gonna show up kind of with that adrenaline for this scene. You know what I mean? Like I felt like he's gonna want like he's gonna want something that same type of energy, but I feel like it's a different part of the movie and a different scene. But I know that when you're directing, you get affected by the scene you were shooting before.
That's actually an interesting point. How do you change your sense of, but I think this scene, you're shooting out of sequence. So you're trying
Right,
to
right,
kind of return to what this is going to be at the early in the film.
right.
And I felt the scene was very important because it actually tells you everything you want to know about who Skylar Whip's character was.
In fact, I'd say what's beautiful about that scene, there's a point in it where the power flips, and
Right.
you you subtly, kindly dominate him, and he can't handle it. Is really what's going on there.
Mhm, mhm.
From
I
how he
I
remembers you as Soup the kid in the first movie. That
right.
yeah.
I guess I'm trying to ask how as a director or as you or in the film, how do you keep that mental continuity when you're going because everything's shot out of sequence? How do you remember all this? You
Well,
know what I mean?
I'd say for me, it helps that I wrote it
Oh,
because,
that's a good
it really, because when you're writing something, you've worked on a scene typically numerous times. So you kind of know what the dynamics are in the scene.
Mm,
So I'd say I know pretty well what the scene, but
got
then
it.
the actor comes in and he or she can bring something to it you didn't anticipate, which can be great or it can be the wrong thing. So.
Stinky poo.
I worried in our scene together, would uh, do did you need to be tougher with him or did you need to show him up? But you sort of showed him up without showing him up, and I think that
Yeah.
really worked. You know,
I got a question, Joe. Do you think that because you're also a DP, does that
I
help you?
was, yes. Yeah.
You don't so you don't do that anymore.
I hadn't done that for quite a while, actually. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
do you
Yeah.
think it helps you as a producer to that the fact that you
Tremendous. Yeah,
um
tremendously. I think
how
it really tell it because you as a DP, I knew, okay, we could do this with this size crew in this thing because I had
mm,
done it myself.
gotcha.
And by I mean what limiting the money you spend gives you more time and vice versa. And time is everything in a low in an indie movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
time is
Also,
money.
one of the things Joe did from the very beginning, which was decisive in terms of getting the movie done on this kind of budget, was we had a DP initially and younger DP. And I think often you get a situation where they kind of want to create a resume out of your movie. Uh, and and I think he wanted to shoot all kinds of Dutch angles out of side windows and really jazz up the visual component of the movie. And
Um,
Joe and I felt like for this movie, that's not really helping the movie particularly. And it would take a lot of time to get those shots right. And in fact, when our DP tried a few of those shots, we're in the editing room, we didn't use a single one of them. You know, so there's and I think what Joe brings to it is I don't need fancy camera work isn't going to make this movie that much better.
mm,
It's got to be camera work that serves the story, the character, the ideas of the movie. Razzle dazzle for its own sake, which you see a lot of now, where
gotcha.
directors and DPs fall in love with a shot, uh, and and I feel like nobody who people who see the film feel like it really is great visually, but it was very simple visually in a lot of ways.
What you said was correct. You did it did have a kind of documentary feel to it. The Road to Everywhere. I have to keep saying it to get it in people's brains.
Yeah, I
Um,
would say I would say Driven did as well, but I don't the documentary feel I had interestingly I heard from a guy who drove a cab with me years ago
yeah,
and he went and he saw Driven. He's coming to the screening of Road to Everywhere next week. But
June
he
17th.
June 17th at the Monica. Uh, he said that he asked me if a number of the actors were real people I had picked up or were they actors. And as you know, every single person in Driven was an actor,
Right.
that but they were so authentic to him, and he had been a long time cab driver.
Right.
And I think sometimes I even had, after we did Driven, I had an agent, and she said, "Well, I can't get you any directing work right now." And I said, "Well, what about writing work? And why
Mm.
don't you circulate the script for Driven? Because I got a lot of compliments on the script." She said, "Oh, nobody will think that was written."
Wow.
I mean,
Wow.
I found that, number one, I didn't know whether to be flattered or insulted, uh, but I think that documentary quality has to do with how you perceive the characters to some degree too.
Yeah. And also to give it to you, like how you direct the actors.
Mhm.
Because it doesn't, you don't, you sort of got rid of the false moments because we were just sort of inundated in the reality of that world. You created such a great world that we were like kind of hard to be faking it.
Well,
Um,
I give a lot of the credit to the actors. Part of it is casting right. I think if you cast really great people, they do great. I mean, you can only do so much in terms of to me, shaping a performance. I mean, you can do some, but especially, I mean, I remember directors doing 2 and 3 pages a day on big budget movies. Well, I guess they've got time to do 25 takes. But after
yeah.
2 or 3 takes on this movie, Daniel Solinger, the line producer, said, "Well, you can do 2 more takes, or you can uh, choose to get your day done. It's up to you. You have a choice. Wrap this up now, and you can do your drone shots, or forget your drone shots. So
Because they're leaving tomorrow.
Yeah, I want to speak more about the film as far as because there was a lot of I don't want to say problems, but there was a lot of, as with most indie filmmaking, it's sort of a difficult task to accomplish. But then you guys had some extra issues. But let's go with it was Tony Todd
yeah.
who was
Joe,
in.
do you want to talk about the Tony Todd situation?
Well, I could say straight. I mean, obviously, we were going to film just before the SAG strike, and that set up a delay we didn't expect. I know it was coming, but we didn't. I think we had some delays before that, and so couldn't and had to shut down for a while. It took quite a while to
Mm,
finally got our approval to go, and then originally had cast Tony Todd as the lead in the film. In fact, this all started as because we had talked to Tony 4 or 5 years ago and about doing a film, and then 3 years ago he agreed to do it, and as every people know, and he was in the original Driven,
absolutely.
and we didn't know, but he was really sick and too sick to actually carry on the role, um, and unfortunately he died probably I think it was in the middle of our shooting the film, right? But Michael,
Yes,
2.5.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
But he
But
was in, he was out. It was really,
yeah, because he's really not. We didn't know, but he because he wasn't saying, but he just was too sick to actually carry on and carry a. Basically, he would have had to carry the film. He was in every scene. I mean, almost every line, or quite a bit of the line. I don't think there was maybe 2 or 3 scenes in the whole film that he wasn't in. And it was written. The part was written for him. But Michael, then you adjusted extremely quickly, and
so we started thinking, I mean, originally, I think our collective sense of it was going to be, Tony Todd said it was two exiles. It would be a black man and a Native American traveling the country, sort of,
Right.
and they would, could they find common ground? And that was sort of the concept. And so we started, we went to black actors in the same age range as Tony, and reached out to them. And we kind of thought, well, is this really the movie? Because we won't have any of the flashbacks that were the lifeblood of the movie, the 30 years later. And
Right.
it just began feeling not right. And but that's what we felt like it should be. I was trying to stick to the original concept. Then at one point, my I talked to my wife and said, "What do you think if Whip Hubley comes back?" Because he was in the original film
Absolutely.
alongside Tony, and she said, "Well, frankly, I always like Whip the most. I thought he was my favorite, lead character in Driven." So,
Right.
so that kind of threw me up for a moment, and then I called Joe and I said, "What do you think of Whip being?" He said, "No way." Joe said,
Then I asked my
Yeah.
wife.
and I said, "No." I said, "Ask your wife," and then I hung up. And he called me back and said, "Let's go for Whip." So I called Whip, and he who had moved to Maine, and I called him, left a message, and I said, and he called me back, and I said, "I have a movie for you." He said, "Well, I'll do it without reading the script." Meanwhile, I had rehearsed Robert Mirabal, our native lead, with Tony Todd for months. So we were concerned, will Robert and his management stay? They signed on for a movie with Tony Todd. Will they stay on with Whip? And they agreed to stay on. Robert really wanted to do the movie. And so we started working with Robert and Whip on. Then they both flew out a week ahead, and I had them in a room together for a week, or 5 days, whatever it was, and that really helped, I think,
Yeah.
creating
Yeah,
chemistry.
this was his first acting role, Robert Mirabal.
Mirabal, yeah. Um,
Mirabal.
he actually, as a young man, he actually went to university and studied acting, but then got kind of uh, involved in music and sort of went off in that direction. But he has, I'd say, in the last 5 or 10 years, done a fair number of smaller roles in television, like Dark
Wow.
Winds and some of these shows, but nothing, as he will admit, offered to be a sheriff or something, for not really anything of much depth for him.
Yeah.
And this was a chance for him. He's a very dedicated artist and of kind of a real uh, um, caring, kind of sensitive, the best kind of actor to work with, because all he wants to do is explore it and go deep. And he worked really hard because he had never carried a movie kind of before
Right.
and had this much, which you can, I'm sure, relate to, this much dialogue to learn. And in a
Yeah.
way of talking, English is not even his first language. So there were all kinds of, in a way, I wrote the movie like for a British actor almost. I mean, there's the use of language is kind of precious a little bit.
Hmm.
And I wanted that kind of quality from the guy, that he was more uh, a very different kind of person, thoughtful, very articulate, would use surprising words in situations, not just the obvious word. Uh, and that wasn't his natural way of talking. So he had to kind of really work with that and find it in himself.
Mm. Wow. But I want us to talk more about Road to Everywhere. In your own words, how would you guys describe this movie?
A couple of things. I think it's a throwback to 70s road movies, and we did that intentionally. But it's a coming of age story for grown-ups. I actually think it's a movie for grown-ups that are just not made that much as much as they should be. And I know uh, I like to go to the movies. I like to go with my wife and talk about it afterwards over a glass of wine or a cup of coffee and
Mm.
talk about what we saw. So we intentionally made a movie that would be a little bit thoughtful, provocative, but also an entertainment. And I think the movie is about people who have lived life a little bit, have made mistakes, have regrets, and sometimes want to make amends, but are still searching. I don't think you stop searching when you get to a certain age. And I think that's what the movie is really about.
For me, Driven was about, and it was a stage of my life. Will my life work out? Will I have any of the dreams? Or, when we all made that film, we were all younger. Our careers were kind of starting. Where are we going? and these drivers, had to ask themselves, we're still driving cabs, or is anything in our life going to work out? That was where I was kind of at that moment, where those drivers were. Now, 30 years later, you're looking back and you've made big mistakes. Things haven't worked. Some things have worked out, some haven't. In a way, it asks the question, have I led a good life? What have I done with my life? Who am I at this stage? Do I have another act left at this point? Those were all questions I wanted to kind of pursue with this. And also, we're living in a world now where where two parts of the country feel like they don't really trust the other and think they have anything in common.
Mm.
So they say, I mean, I'm from Georgia, and I've seen people on Facebook say California, oh, those people, they're not the, the same people. They're not the right people like we
Not
are,
humans.
Yeah, not humans. Yeah. So it was to put two people who were really might on the surface have nothing in common, and find them,
Mm.
allow them to explore a common humanity, seems like, really what we ought to be talking about now. Where's our common humanity?
I was going to ask you about that on top of it. Where did the idea for the story, because you included a Native American character, which is pretty
Uh,
rare.
I think the Native American angle, Joe, wasn't that your idea originally? I think it was.
Yeah, well, I had lived in Colorado before and drove to LA a number of times to the Navajo reservation,
Mm.
and it was uh, and honestly it was pretty simple. We could have been the road to Bakersfield, but wanted to take the audience on an adventure someplace that they hadn't been before necessarily, and
Yeah.
I knew it would be, it would work in
Doesn't
that.
sound as exciting.
Yeah, yeah.
That the whole native idea, and Joe had done a lot of traveling in Arizona. He knew the visually how
Mm.
powerful that would be. So that I'd say that was a real, I'd say his contribution really opened the film up in a lot of ways.
Not since I mean, I could think of Flower Moon or Smoke Signals or anything like that. There hasn't been that many movies where uh indigenous Americans are so prominent. Like he's just like and you don't make a big deal about it. You don't beat people over the head with it, but he's definitely like an integral part of this movie. And he's kind of, well, he's the lead, but he's also kind of like just a guy going through the same problems that everybody else in the world trying to find himself goes through. So,
Well, you just articulated exactly what the way I saw this. Uh,
oh,
just a guy. I I think Joe and I talked about that many times. With
hmm,
the same, not there's a tendency to make uh, Native Americans something like polysyllabic in some. I mean,
absolutely.
rather monosyllabic,
Monosyllabic,
rather.
yeah.
Yeah, monosyllabic. That and they are different. But actually, in making the film, we encountered a number of they're indistinguishable from everybody. Where we were, they've got big businesses. They're doing well. They're
Great sense of
traveling.
humor, that you never rarely see in movies,
They
Right.
have a
That's
sense of humor. They're
self-deprecating.
fun, and
You feel like writers, like there's a certain amount you're tapped into the ethos, you're tapped into the
I
collective.
think that's true. But for a while, like for example, on Driven, I literally agonized late at night about the Tony Todd character. I felt like, oh, I don't really know his life. I'm not
Hmm.
sure I can write that believably and can do him credit, do
Hmm.
him service as a character. I don't think I mean, the character you played, Mushroom Soup, was a guy who became a good friend of mine in the course of and we used to go out and he talked about mushroom soup all the time. So I kind of knew that guy, and I knew his family background, and
Gotcha.
with the character I based the Tony character on a guy. He was kind of a composite of guys that I drove with, but I didn't know him that well. So, it's, but I think as you do more and more writing, you start to trust yourself a little more. And I think I trusted myself a little more. And having Joe, as I said earlier, looking at the material, responding to it, there created a dynamic where I just felt like it felt much more relaxed, kind of. And
Yeah. Because you have had some sneak peeks of this movie, screening.
Right.
So how is the indigenous American community responding to this movie?
I'd say we've shown it in Santa Fe
Hmm.
and Albuquerque and Taos, and they're loving it. They're loving. I mean, we've had great reception from them. That is, in New Mexico, Robert's very well known. He's a two-time Grammy winner who and uh, has toured around the world since he was 17 years old, performing. And but uh, what we've seen so far is they love the fact that he plays a regular guy, as he would describe it. He could easily be a guy from New Jersey, and
Yeah.
yeah.
So, what movie did you guys just see?
The Road to Everywhere. It was great.
And what was some of your takeaway from this movie?
I just loved it. I thought it was such a great film. I thought it was so great to see a Native American actor portrayed in a different light than I think you typically see. And there was a lot of male vulnerability, which was interesting. I thought it was a really great film.
Just kept you engaged. You were really into this story, and you just wanted to see where it was going to go. I just was very engaged. I wanted to see how they would end up, and just where they would end up with the daughter and the son. I knew that the end was going to be good with the son. I knew that they would.
Yeah, there's that twist at
be
the end.
copacetic.
Yeah, there was that twist at the end, which I think was.
It's an enlightening movie, and it's heartwarming, and it's feel good in the end. It's a feel good movie, so I enjoyed it. Yeah, but he's a good curmudgeon, I'll tell you that much.
I hope this is a movie that starts drawing attention. I really think it has something unique to offer. Just thinking about life and dealing with changes in life and struggles in life, and I think it really has some worthwhile lessons just to have people think about their own lives. I think it provokes that. And
quite emotional at the end, and just the being forgiving and forgiving yourself, and that was so it was so apparent that they were both so broken and learned from each other.
Both men kind of coming to grips with all the battles and things that they were trying to deal with, and each of them, in some sense, conflicting with each other, but eventually becoming supportive of each other. And I thought that was very, very poignant, very, very well done.
If you could describe Road to Everywhere in 3 words, what would you say?
Unique, deep, and very intimate. 4 words. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay, thank you.
You got it.
Because Flower Moon, Dance of the Wolves, all these movies, the Smoke Signals, even movies, some shot by also Native American directors or writers, they tend to sort of deal with being Native American.
Right.
And I think being a person of color myself, like you look at the 70s movies, there's a while where you're just, hey, playing your race.
Right.
But it
Exactly.
always feels great when you're just playing a person, because that's really just one part of a small part of you. And I learned this from doing comedy, going around touring, that you I show up at a redneck bar and I think, man, I'm gonna get killed. But then you start doing jokes and you get them laughing and you realize, hey, wait a minute, they're going through the same things I'm going through. They hate the stories that I start telling in these jokes, that they they're relating to it, I'm relating to it, and then you go to Denmark and they have trouble with their mother-in-law too, you know what I mean?
Right.
So we're all going through the same thing in different languages and different
Apropos
outfits.
of that, Rawle, one of the native actors in the movie came up to me and said, I really appreciate how authentic this is to the native experience. I really appreciate all the research you did. And I did zero research.
I was going to ask that. How does that make you feel? How does that make?
Well,
This
it
is to
began.
both of you.
I'll go first because there's a story I like to tell about. There was a movie that Dustin Hoffman made, Marathon Man, with Laurence
Laurence
Olivier,
Olivier. Hmm.
and Dustin Hoffman had a method background in acting, and he felt like he was a long distance runner. So before every scene, he'd run a mile and get very sweaty and exhausted. And at one point, Laurence Olivier got up close to him in the scene and said, "Why don't you try acting, young man?" And that in a way is sometimes with writing, I used to lie on the floor for 20 minutes before I would write a scene. You try to contort, do amazing amounts of research. And I think maybe as you get older, I'm sure you feel this as an actor and performer, you
Hmm.
start to trust yourself a little more,
Yeah.
and I think that's a big part of the process.
And Joe, how did you feel knowing that the movie connected with those people? And you also drove through those areas of Pueblo. Robert's from
He's
Taos
from the Taos
Pueblo.
Pueblo.
Pueblo, yeah.
Yeah, but I had driven a number of times through the Navajo reservation,
Hmm.
which is gigantic, and uh, uh, it actually was really, really rewarding. I love it, and in fact, I'm thrilled because we're also going to be the film is being screened in Window Rock, which is the capital of the Navajo Nation.
Wow. It felt, I mean, I'm not Navajo, obviously, but it felt, I was like, this movie feels, and I think it's because of mainly Robert's character. He has such an authentic feel as that guy. I want to talk more about him a little bit. His original language is, I think, Tiwa,
Very good, right? Yeah.
and I even got some of his songs because he has an album. I'm going to try to remember this album because I want people to go out and get it. But it's songs from a painted cave.
Painted Cave, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and he's a great musician, a Native American flute player. Would you say flute,
Flute, he
Joe?
plays the flute and also has started by building them, designing and making them.
Um, Being an actor myself, I'm impressed with the fact that, and I think maybe being a performer helped him, but he's not only carrying this movie, but I don't even know that many actors that can carry that role, Michael, because your writing is so verbose. There's parts where he's verbose. It's very philosophical. And for an actor to pull that off, who's never, I mean, I don't even know if I've ever had that many lines in a movie. And I've been in it for 30 years, so I think it was very impressive. So, and I'm wondering, from you guys both, like if you think that his maybe being a musician, or maybe he felt so close to the character that he was able to pull that off. And Joe?
Well, I think he had.
I didn't want to.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry.
You want to take it or you want?
No,
Sorry,
I'd like
Michael.
you to actually.
Yeah. The what is important for that character to play off against Whip's character, Skylar, is that deep down, he has a real sense of humor, and you never quite know whether he's pulling your leg or telling you the truth throughout the movie. And I think his talent as a musical performer, he's got this personality that allows that part to come out naturally, that it's not acting. He is somebody who will pull your leg, tell, you don't really, that, and I think that complexity and lack of being on the nose is what benefits him in that role so much. And it was
Yeah.
hard to cast, actually. Michael, worked hard to get the right character for that. And
We went through two
lucky.
different casting directors. We had to find a woman named Renee Haynes whose specialty was native casting for big
Mm.
movies, and she agreed to do it and sent us people. But even when I saw his, these days you don't get, as you well know, you don't get in the room with the actor. They put themselves on video and you go through each audition, and I
Yeah.
looked at what he had done. It was okay, but it didn't blow me away. But I went on to YouTube and found his performances, and I thought, okay, if I can get this charismatic performer, he's a kind of a
Mm.
rock star. If I can get that rock star persona going in this movie, we've got it. If he can get there. And I really talked to him about, a sort of rock star quality that I wanted to see. Let that happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
let
have
me
one of his songs actually. I don't know if you know that, but Medicine Man. When you watch the movie, which people will see, uh June 17th,
and then a week it'll be in LA for a whole week, by the
a
way.
whole week.
Oh,
I'm gonna ask you about that. I'm gonna just ask you a few more things, but I want to ask you, when you watch this movie, you see that you chose to do black and white, but then when you look at the flashbacks, they're in color. I don't want to give away too much because, but it is a kind of a cool part of the movie. Now, tell me about that. What made you choose that? That was a very cool thing, I thought, for me watching the movie.
Well,
Um,
let me go back to Driven. I actually wanted to shoot Driven in black and white.
mm,
And Joe and Dan Leak, the late Dan Link, who was the producer, both didn't want to do it. And they
right.
kind of both talked me out of it. And Joe said to
and I
me this
regret
time,
that to this day, by the way. But
I loved Peter Bogdanovich's film, The Last Picture Show, one of my favorites. And
Mhm.
when that was black and white, it was a revelation at the time. Uh, and but one way to view it, I think, is that because I get this question, and every time we've shown the movie, this question is asked: why are the flashbacks in color and the movie in black and white? And one thing that sort of worked is the idea that we tend to view the past with rose-colored glasses. Wasn't that a wonderful thing? And the past probably wasn't all that great, but we view it that way. And the present is more kind of, it has more gravitas. It's more stark, and that's sort of one angle of the decision. But the other is, I'm a big fan of noir films, and I
Mm.
love black and white. I think it creates a gravitas about the characters and the movie that you often don't get in color. There's something about it. You immediately, when I turn on a movie from the 40s, I immediately take note of the characters. I'll look at a movie from the 70s in color. It won't have that immediate effect on me. So I think I think you can achieve, which I hope we've done, greater gravitas for the characters, often using black and white.
On the sneak peeks, the sneak
right.
previews, how did they
Well,
respond to the black and white and stuff?
honestly, the one thing that's been really thrilling about screening the film,
Mm,
to me, is people, we've all been to a lot of screenings where people talk about the film,
mm,
but in these screenings, people will look at it and then start talking about themselves and about how they relate to the movie, things that have happened in their life. And I've never seen that in a movie
that's kind of cool.
screening before. Um, it's almost like it's a therapy section almost. They say, "Oh yeah," that because they're relating to a character about it. So females are relating to their husband or ex-boyfriend or ex-husband, and
Yeah.
and and they view it from their own eyes.
The directing and the camera work and all that stuff, it's kind of it's out of the way. I'm more it helps you get into the story more, but I don't even notice it. I notice a lot of times when I watch a film, I go, "Oh, that's an interesting shot." But I didn't do that with this film. I just kind of was like, so the characters superseded even the filmmaking.
Uh, uh, Years ago, I was on the set of a movie called Wise Blood, directed by John Huston, and I had lunch with the director of photography, Jerry Fisher, who British, well-known British DP, director of photography.
Hmm.
And he said to me, if anybody ever says the camera work was great on the movie, he thinks he failed.
Mm.
you know, if you're thinking about, wow, this really looks good, or this sure is a beautifully shot movie, you've left the movie.
You
It's
drifted off.
really,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel the same, Joe?
I do feel the same. I like the fact that people don't know. When I was a DP, I liked the fact people didn't notice the camera work, and I think Bruce Allen Green really bought into that. He was a longtime Hollywood Steadicam operator, and
Right.
and he operated his own Steadicam in this film, and you barely, I mean, Michael and I noticed, but people barely even notice that because he's so subtle with it, rather than these amazing shots, he just uses it as a way to take the camera where the audience wants to be at that time. And I think makes it you may not notice it, but it really adds to the movie.
Mm.
Yeah, he actually has an interesting backstory. Bruce Allen Green. He shot 7 movies for a former famous comedian actor in Russia and Ukraine called uh, President Zelensky. He was his DP for much of his career. Which, yeah,
One of the comedic greats.
that's right. Yeah, world's most famous comedian, maybe.
I modeled myself after him. No.
That's a good
Uh,
model.
Yeah.
I want to talk about your distribution technique because this movie is going to be sort of would you say it was four-walled? Four-walled because
Not
it's kind
exactly.
of
No.
sorry.
No, I wouldn't. We hired uh, a film booking agent
Hmm.
who is taking it to theaters and booking it directly, not through a distributor. We do have a digital distributor who who will release it on September 15th. But we decided to boost that where we actually hired a book, but we're doing a split with the theaters that he's getting. So
Got you. But it's going to be in LA and it's going to be in New York. So what would you call this first run? It's kind of pretty genius because you're tying it into his music and him as a rock star kind of.
yeah. Well, we did this as a preview in New Mexico, and
Mm.
what's happening is we're on some of the theaters that we booked it in. We're New York, LA, Houston, and in Santa Fe again, and Albuquerque. We're doing what we call the Road to Everywhere road show, where we show the movie, and afterwards, Robert and his band will perform a few songs with a Q&A with Michael. And it's kind of an evening of the movie, storytelling, and music that I think we've done it before. People love it when they go see that.
I
And
think it's a great idea because we live in a world of social media and phones and Zoom and
yeah,
and I think people like I've noticed this happened in Japan and it's starting to be like a movement where people want to just be in contact with real something happening. And with AI and stuff, you never know what you're watching. Like I'm not even here right now. You know what I mean? No,
yeah,
but no, but I mean it's like I think we're hungry for real interaction and
I
real thing.
agree.
And your movie sort of embodies that too. So it's a great technique, I think.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm thrilled people are going back to see movies in movie theaters again. It's a lost pleasure, I believe.
Well, you're giving them something they can't get at home,
Yeah,
when you see this movie with Robert and his music and then you get a little song and then he does poetry. He's really kind of an interesting character
yeah, yeah.
because he's well, what would I say multi-dimensional as far as in the arts, as far as the arts. He doesn't
Absolutely.
just act. Now he's acting in a movie, now he's playing music and
We
then
Joe and I went to his house, this beautiful place that he's put together on the Taos Pueblo, and he's a singer, actor, flute
Farmer.
maker, performer, flute maker. He makes his own wine, which he sells. He makes his own boots. Is there something I'm missing, Joe?
Well,
I
he's
mean,
also one of the tribal leaders of the Pueblo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and has a connection bringing youth back and forth from New Mexico to Peru, and he brings Peruvian students to Taos Pueblo, and he does that every year. They alternate once a year, going one direction or the other, and so uh, he's often busy this summer doing tribal ceremonies. Actually, that are
Renaissance man.
absolutely, yeah.
I want to bring up Whip because Whip is the other lead.
And I want to say Whip Hubley, been acting for probably 40 years, been in Top Gun, Executive Decision, countless TV shows. Just want
Yeah.
to give him his.
The exotic quality of Robert is a lot of what people are talking about in the movie, but there's something about what Whip, it's kind of like the way we talked about the camera work. It's kind of like Whip is so solid and genuine, people almost forget that he's what a significant performance and performer he is. I mean, I thought, in a sense, he delivers the movie because it's his pathos that kind of drives the movie forward, and his subtlety and generosity as an actor, I think, really made the whole film work because, at one point in rehearsal, Robert said to him, I'm really a newbie, and when we were rehearsing with Tony Todd, Tony was a little bit more impatient with Robert, because he's thinking, why am I working with this guy who really hasn't done a lot? And Whip was I think Tony got more generous as we began working, but Whip is, as you know, because you know him really well, he's an incredibly kind human being, generous human being. And so he was focused on his performance, but he was so generous and warm and giving to Robert that relationship, it allowed Robert to come to life, I think, that with another actor who had maybe a bigger ego, a little more selfish, what you see on screen from Robert may not have happened.
Right. I was going to ask you about that because what certain characters carried on from Driven, and what made you choose those characters like Diane DeLazio, Rawle D. Lewis, one of the handsome guys in there. And what made you choose those? Xander Berkeley was part of it. Dan Roebuck came back, but certain people didn't.
Well, I think it's a good question. I think the reason just about everybody came back. I mean, originally Diane wasn't going to come back because it was going to be Tony and Lee Garlington who were in the original.
Gotcha.
So when we cast Whip, Diane was an automatic. We knew we wanted to bring Daniel Roebuck back because I had sort of thought maybe he would be the dispatcher this time, and he would be a lifer as a cab driver, and that kind of worked for the story. They have a scene together, and he says, "Let's face it, we're cab drivers." That was kind of the idea of bringing Dan back. And you and I talked when we ran into each other. I wasn't sure whether you should come back or not, and then your character then became the vehicle to tell the whole backstory of the movie. Success and failure and his feelings of not succeeding in life. You made that happen. I couldn't have happened without you and your character having a level of success. So you kind of discover this in the writing process.
Good.
Some of these, there's a lot of discovery in the writing. People think often that, well, you came up with a plot and then you wrote the script, and actually you write draft after draft and you find things. A lot of the major events in the movie were discovered in the writing draft number 7,
I just want to tell this quick little anecdote about Lou Rawls, who was in the first movie Driven. I mean, I'm saying first because it feels like a precursor to Road to Everywhere. He told this is in line with what you're saying as far as discovering genius stumbling on it. I asked Lou Rawls on the set, I was like, he has a song you'll never find. You'll never find it. My mom loved that song. So I was like, hey, how did you even come up with that song? You'll never find another love like mine. He said I was in a bar in Chicago trying to write a song and trying to think, am I ever gonna really come up with a hit or anything? And this guy is on a payphone in the corner of the bar, just yelling at his old lady. And he's like, yeah, and he's going on. And he's like, I wish this guy would shut up. So it's like kind of, and the guy, and when he hangs up, and I'm gonna use the exact words he says, but I'll bleep it out in here. But he goes, oh yeah, well, you'll never find another love like me, bitch. And then he hangs up, and he says, huh. He said, I couldn't call it You'll Never Find Another Love Like Me, bitch. So I just called it You'll Never Find.
That's a great story.
I thought, and I thought, here I am, was expecting this great story. Well, I felt that love was I was expecting this brilliant story for him to tell me how he came up with the song, and it's just an argument in the corner.
Uh,
It's coming out, like you said, Joe, in September.
On digital and meaning online, streaming.
Worldwide,
Yes.
or
Yeah,
right?
it'll be we
But in the interim, people can show up at theaters and on the road show. They'll
right.
meet. Will they get music and
Without the roadshow, you can go see the movie regularly at the Monica for the next week. In New York, the
in,
roadshow is on Friday the 19th at the Village East in New York City. Uh, the following week, it's in Houston. We have the road show at the River Oaks Theater, and then plays for a week after that at the theater, and it's in 8 or 9 cities:
that's
Wilmington,
cool.
Delaware, Portland,
Chicago.
Seattle. Yeah.
But there's probably like a website you could go to find this, right? So that they
Road
can.
to Sure. It's roadtoeverywheremovie.com, and we have a list of where it's playing, and as theaters pick it up, we add them onto it. Yeah.
And the indigenous Americans or Native Americans, they're gonna love. They seem to be loving this movie, and they can see it in New Mexico and all these different places, right?
Yes, right. Well,
Like
right
Rawle.
now we have it booked in Window Rock, which is on the Navajo Nation, Sedona, Arizona, which is adjacent to the reservation, and then it'll play in Santa Fe and Albuquerque, and it keeps building. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to just wrap it up by asking, like, what do you want people to take away from this movie? And this question is to both of you.
Hmm. That I have to hesitate for a moment. Think about
Well, that's a great question. We want people to take what they learn from it personally. One, I hope people want to come out of it thinking about reflecting on their own life. It's hard to say what they should take from it, but if it makes them think about, or am I, what makes me happy, actually? What do I need to give my life a little bit of purpose? And I think that's what the movie's about. Do you agree, Michael?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Also, for me, I just think I think Elon Musk said the greatest weakness in the American character was empathy for other people, you know. Uh, and I kind of think it's just the opposite, that empathy, feeling. I think if you come away with a little deeper feeling for other human beings, about your little deeper feeling about yourself, if you take time to think about ideas about other people, about your life, if it makes you go deeper as a human being, I think we've succeeded.
Yeah. It's kind of why I'm doing this podcast. I wanted to, a lot of people, every time I ask someone to do the podcast, they go, I don't know if I'm interesting enough, or I don't know if I was like, trust me, you are.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because everyone has something to say and contribute. They just never get a chance to, or never get enough. They never get people to listen to them long enough to to say, you know, when someone like I was joking, but like someone in Uganda can see this and go, "Hey, this guy is just like me," you know.
Yeah.
I think you're always often surprised how much we think we're so different, but how much people are similar. We got Joe Mealey, Joseph Mealey, Michael Paradise Shoob. I love that Paradise in the middle of your name. I don't know
Uh,
How
Well,
did
it's actually
you?
I don't mind it being paradise, but it's
Oh,
actually paradise. But it's
Parodies.
okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But maybe I'll go with paradise
I always
instead.
call you Michael Paradise. I say all three names in my head, and I call you Paradise. I've been saying the middle name wrong, but because it's like such a cool name. Um, a great collaborative team of filmmakers here. Bush's Brain. You guys have to see that. Well, you want to go down your you want to brag
Well,
about yourself.
I think our three pieces are Driven, Bush's Brain, and now Road to Everywhere.
Yeah. Those are your most proudest
I think those
accomplishments.
are, I think, the three things we're most proud of together.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And still making. You guys have anything you want to do further? Is there another are you 10 years later you're gonna call me up to be
I think there's definitely going to be a next film. I'm begging Joe to continue, and Joe is saying he's not, maybe not. So, but there will be another movie.
Thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you, Rawle.
Thank you,
We had a
Rob.
great time. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.